Hi everybody, this is Johnny. I'm going to go over CalTPA Cycle 2, Rubric 2.5. This one's under Step 2 still, Teach and Assess. And this one's going to be about informal assessment, so let's read the essential question. How does the candidate use informal assessment to monitor students' deep understanding of content, higher order thinking, and adjust instruction to meet the needs of all learners? Okay, so the important thing here, what matters, informal assessment. Okay, and the three things that fall under that is that you're monitoring students' learning, you're monitoring students' learning for higher order thinking skills, and you're using what you're learning from your informal assessment to adjust your instruction. Let's make sure you get the three: monitoring students' learning, higher order thinking skills, adjusting your instruction. That's what this one's all about. Okay, so let's take a look at level 3, the starting place. And as I've said before, level 3 is important. You must remember that you have to meet all the requirements for level 3, otherwise you're moved down to level 2. And so what I'm going to do is deconstruct level 3 so that you know specifically what all the particular requirements are, and you can make your own kind of check sheet to make sure you understand every bit of level 3. So you can see that it's written in 2 blocks. Here's a block, and here's a block. Doesn't mean there's just 2 requirements. Each one of these blocks has a couple different things going on at once, so let's make sure we understand what's going on in each one. Let's read the first one. Candidates' use of informal assessment monitors students' higher order thinking, analysis, synthesis, evaluation, interpretation, transfer, resulting in an understanding of whole class progress. Okay, this is why you're doing, how your whole class is doing, toward the learning goals and the students' deep learning of content. Let's take this one apart, the musts for this one. Okay, the first one is higher order thinking must focus on, the informal assessment must focus on higher order thinking. Okay, so this is rich questions, not just superficial or discrete answer questions. This isn't just the sum of a couple numbers in an arithmetic problem. Okay, this is what's happening with the numbers, what patterns can you see, what else can we say about this set of numbers and what might happen with these numbers. So in ELA, in language arts, it might be, instead of just, who was the first person to speak in chapter 3 about this, it might be, how do the characters relate to each other, how are they talking to each other, who gets to which character you think has power over the other characters, all those kinds of things that are about higher order thinking. And they wrote down analysis, synthesis, evaluation, interpretation, transfer. Okay, work those kinds of ideas. The second requirement in this first block is understanding how the whole class is progressing towards the learning goals. The point of the informal assessment is to check yourself, to see that I'm teaching this and I'm trying to move my whole class forward. Am I doing that? That's what the work of the informal assessment is. Okay, and I'll put down here, just make sure you're always giving attention to higher order thinking and learning. So 2 things on this one: assessing higher order thinking and checking how the whole class is progressing. Those are the first 2 musts for level 3. Let's read the second block. Candidate monitors student progress sufficiently to inform teaching in the moment. And here's the important part: adjust instructions to meet the needs of all students based on assessment results. The most important word here is adjusts. Okay, so let's see what the musts are for this one. Musts. You must monitor. The informal assessment is about checking along the way, ongoing assessment. My suggestions here, you can think about walk-arounds, the way you listen during discussions, when you poll kids, thumbs up, thumbs down, fist to 5. Okay, an exit ticket could be a kind of informal assessment too. These monitoring kinds of informal assessment allow you to get to what's important with the second piece, which is adjustment. Okay, so in the midst of your teaching, in the moment kind of teaching, and that's what they write here, in the moment kind of teaching, what information are you gathering from your kids that allows you to adjust your teaching? Okay, teacher moves based on the informal assessment that are clearly intended to better students' understanding or work towards the learning goal. Sorry to forget my apostrophe here. So this is what you're doing in the midst of your teaching, all right? And based on your checking in on your students, through your walk-arounds, your discussion, your polling, little quizzes, whatever things you're doing while you're teaching, how are those informing you, and what adjustments do you make based on what information you're getting from your students through your informal assessment? All right, let's back up. For level 3, there are 4 things. 1, it must focus on higher order thinking. 2, you must be able to show how you're understanding whole class progression. 3, you must be monitoring what's going on with your students. And 4, you must be making adjustments based on what you're learning from the monitoring. All right, and those are the things that have to happen for level 3. Let's go to level 4 because we want to strive. Under level 4 is often just a bit more. So, put all your energy in trying to meet level 3. That's fantastic. But sometimes a little step more, a little extra work will get you to a level 4. So let's take this one apart. Again, you can see that there are 2 blocks. Let's take each of the blocks apart. It starts with all of level 3 plus. Candidate provides adaptations or accommodations during informal assessments for specific students to meet their unique learning needs and makes targeted adjustments to their instruction. Okay, let's take this one apart. Under the musts. Okay, adjustments and accommodations, that's what matters here. You must show that you're adjusting and accommodating for your students. And you want to do this based on tailored intervention for specific students based on informal assessment. So what are you learning from the informal assessment that allows you to adjust for students' learning? How are you changing your activities? How are you changing your interaction? How are you changing your requirements or the direction you give to students based on the informal assessment to give them a way to the core content? All right? So I wrote down shifting instruction for particular students based on what you learn about them from your informal assessment. Okay, so that's one of the musts. Let's look at the second block. Candidate provides students multiple ways, this is always often with level 4, multiple ways to demonstrate their learning. So here are examples: verbal, written, drawing, diagramming, performing, and more, through a range of informal assessments. So the big idea here is that you want to have different ways to check in with students, not just one standard way. So the musts are very clear here. You must be using varied forms of informal assessment. My suggestions: polls, fist to 5, thumbs up, thumbs down, some kinds of hand signals, exit tickets, between lessons. How do you know how they've done at the end of lesson 1? That tells you what to do with lesson 2, how to start. Think about quizzes. And they're informal quizzes, they're just checks. What happens during discussion, simple written responses. Think about these in terms of student accessibility. So make sure that students can show you what they know. That's one of the things about informal assessment too. You may have an informal assessment that kind of lets kids show you what they know, but what kind of informal assessment is the best way to get at what kids know in the moment so that you can move with that, all right? So what form of informal assessment will best allow them to give you the best information about their learning? Keep that in mind. So level 4, I'm suggesting 2 requirements. All right, 2 requirements: adaptations and accommodations, and the second being varied forms of informal assessment. You have to justify all those, though. Let's look at level 5 to really reach. So here is level 5, okay, and this one says in one long block, all of levels 3 and 4 plus, candidate purposefully uses informal assessments to advance or deepen learning and administers assessments in a transparent and intellectually safe way that celebrates student progress and supports growth for all students. Example given: candidate reviews learning goals with students so that they are aware of exactly what they are expected to know and be able to demonstrate. Candidate notes progress of learning first, then reviews what students have not yet mastered. Okay, So the must for this one, I'm going to say this particular level 5 is a reach, and it's worth reaching for. Let's go through why. The first part, informal assessments must be understood by students and talked about with them as a way to improve everyone's learning. So it's not something that's happening on the side. Students are involved in the assessments, informal assessments, so they're using it and starting to begin, or you're moving them to understand that these checks for understanding are for them to get better, not just for you to teach better. You want to celebrate students' progress. You want to support growth for all students. Okay, so back to level 5 is often about inclusivity, so make sure that happens. And this is about involving students in the assessment process. Ensure students know how they are doing for themselves. Okay, not just something you tell them, but they have some good way to understand it for themselves. And then the last piece, focus on strengths and then needs. Okay, this is to avoid deficit thinking about students' work or how they're doing with the learning goals. So for 5 on this particular rubric, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things you want to try to work for. All right. If we go through for this rubric, sources of evidence. Okay. First one is the annotated video clips. This is where in your video clips you're going to talk about informal assessment, and you want to be talking about, if we look at level 5, about how you're involving students in the process. You want to note where you're being positive and focusing on students, celebrating students' progress. You want to show where you're focusing on strengths and then on needs. Okay, so the annotated video clips is the place where you amplify, show clearly that you're doing all these things in levels 3, 4, and 5. And you also have the written narrative. Okay, so what you say about your use of informal and student self-assessments, focusing again on the positive use of these assessments to especially, and do remember this, especially to monitor how you're checking for understanding, but also how you're adjusting your instruction. So both in the annotated video clips and in the written narrative, focus on those two things. I'm monitoring to see how my students are doing on these things, and I'm adjusting my instruction based on what they've shown me because. So make sure those things happen both in the annotated video clips and in your written narrative. I hope this one was helpful. I'm going to move on to the 6th one, 6th rubric now.